Didn't walk me down no stairs. Didn't want me about
You may have heard this song while scrolling through social media, or maybe even this one. These are just a couple of the AI artists topping the charts this past year, alongside a slew of AI influencers landing brand deals. And the creative world is divided in what this means, questioning, is this the future or the beginning of the end of human creativity? But while the mainstream media focuses on polarizing the debate of AI in the music, acting, and creative world, they've given little attention to the fact that some AI tools are being built to support creators and artists in empowered ways. My guest today on Brains Byte Back is doing just that. Shahrzad Rafati is the founder and CEO of RHEI, a platform that she built on the belief that AI should work for creators, not replace them. She created RHEI to scale their impact the same way that AI already does in other industries, so that humans can focus on content, storytelling, and real connection. Because no matter how advanced synthetic talent becomes, culture is still driven by genuine human connectivity. Today, we're talking about what that means in the new era of creativity.
My name is Shahrzad Rafati. I'm the founder and CEO of RHEI. Based in Vancouver, Canada.
Happy to have you here is because I feel like the creative world is kind of having a moment right now. And that's odd to say because I feel like obviously the creative world is attention seeking, right? But when it comes to AI, I feel like mainstream media has been covering the topic of AI generated artists, the debate around it, specifically we've all seen it in the news, Tilly Norwood or Breaking Rust. Everyone basically has something to say about AI when it comes to the creative world. And it comes up with brings these bigger questions within the industry. So people are really asking whether it's going to amplify creativity or if it's going to automate it out of existence. So I want to unpack this with you today because you're kind of in a unique position because you're building tools that are basically dedicated for creators to scale, right? Tools that they could leverage in order for them not to lose their voice, but to find an efficient way to develop their creativity. Is that a good way to describe it?
It is. It is. I mean, if you think about it, let's look at the physics of creativity, right? You have the modern creator that is spending about 20% of their time on the visionary work of actually the art, the creation. And they're spending about 80% of their work doing other things, whether that is creating metadata for their content, doing analysis of their trends, understanding, kind of what they should be working on, managing their community, editing their content, all the logistics. So I think when we say amplify, we don't really mean generating content. I think when, we mean by collapsing, the latency between vision and reality. I think this is really important because we talk a lot about this at RHEI. We're really looking at decoupling scale from dilution. And that's I think, new physics of the creator economy and the creative sector. And I think practically thinking about it, what does that look like? It looks like, for us, what we've done with Made, we built this intelligent team that is very much so personalized to your taste, and they're proactive, and it's actually very effortless to work with them. And they act as that organization of one. So instead of a creator spending 4 hours analyzing, why their numbers dropped, if they had retention issues, analyzing, understanding specifically what they should be working on, the agent already does that. They look at the data, they understand the trends, they proactively, draft parts of kind of a solution for you, whether that is hey, look, the thumbnail that you created for your content wasn't really great. Let's create a few thumbnails for you to give you an option. So, your engagement dropped because your fans, you didn't respond to your fans. How do we actually kind of draft, a number of replies in your voice, align with you. So then you ultimately can then choose what works for you. And I think that allows you to then take away a lot of that workflow and challenges that a creator is facing today, where they're wearing multiple hats and they have to do so many things so to get them back to focusing on the creative itself. And I think it's just we're taking that solopreneur approach. Who's kind of, if you think about the creator that is overwhelmed, 75% of the creators are burnt out. So how do you actually kind of take that for someone that is feeling overwhelmed, feeling burned out, and then promoting them to be the visionary in chief, to feel empowered? So we can give them like this very much so intelligent team that is built in their voice, so they can focus like exclusively on the one thing that they're good at. So it's like taking the focus away from silicon and then putting a greater focus on what we like to call the human signal.
You mentioned something, I think it's the new era of creativity. And you mentioned that in your recent panel. Can you describe exactly what you mean by that?
I think it's a great question, and I think what we're like what we like to refer to it as this like having this symbiotic relationship between AI and humanity, right? Like if you think about it, the vision, if I look at where we are now and the future that we want to create, what we want to build is like really I envision a creative ecosystem that is not defined by or nor is it like wanting to create an environment where you're actually replacing human creativity. So it's not defined by like displacement, but it's actually a radical amplification where the friction between that inspiration and how you come up with ideas, create ideas, and then that tangible execution of bringing it to life is what we want to focus on. So that's kind of where I feel that what we need to retire is this like cynical I think misconception of AI replacing human creativity, but ultimately looking at what we want to kind of like all the great players like made. What we want to do is we want to actually focus more on that human signal. So how do you create a symbiotic relationship between the human and the AI so you can have ultimately the best output? So it's kind of like really looking at building these healthy ecosystems for the future. It is kind of looking at maybe perhaps a symbiotic studio where AI acts as that tireless apprentice where it's handling all the executive matters, while the human is very much so focused on mastering their creativity and being that architect of their creative output. So it's more so about how it's not so much about thinking about how did you make this, but why did you dream this?
It sounds like you're leveraging the newer forms of AI. And this is exactly what other industries are doing. I mean, we're doctors, finance, they're leveraging AI to basically, or agentic AI specifically, and they define it as it's a teammate. It's not necessarily going there to replace the work. And I feel that's the same concept that's happening right now, especially with the creative world. How did you end up in this? I know originally you're from Canada, so am I, right?
Yes.
And I could say that Canadians are creative. They love to, work in arts, content creation. What's your background and how did you end up just kind of thinking about the fact that this is a tool that people need right now?
Of course, yes, I'm definitely a proud Canadian, and but I grew up in Iran, in Tehran during the war, and I think it was at the time where content was very much so rationed and inequality was just very much so visible, and it was very much so constant. But even in that time, I was watching a very handful of channels. We had access to like 4 TV channels, so I could actually see how the power of that creativity and the ability that you can actually kind of like look at shifting perspective, informing you, inspiring you, and helping you to connect with the rest of the world was so important. So it really kind of, I think from a very, very much so young age, I wanted to create a future that looked different, and not just for myself, but for everyone around me. And so when I moved to Canada, I spoke very little English. I was 17. I didn't have any computer skills, but I had the passion for technology and had a belief in transformative power of like creativity and how do you actually bring that to life. So content actually played a very important role in my life because it helped me learn the language, obviously connect with the culture. And that experience very much so, Eric, solidified my conviction that creativity was more than entertainment. It was like very much so about empowering human potential. And exactly that's what we're doing at RHEI. And RHEI was born from that actual belief. And, we kind of evolved from obviously our roots in the creator economy to obviously building our platform Made, which is really very much so a creative operating system. So if you think about it, it's a creative operating system where you have access to these intelligent team members you with every aspect of the creative workflow. And I'm excited about that. Because we're now leading this augmented creativity era, and we're doing this so responsibly because we don't want humans to become prompt engineers. What we want to do is we want to make sure that as we're going through this race to achieving super intelligence, it's more so around how do we make sure that the things that make humans so unique, whether that is empathy or creativity, remain really at the front and center, and that we really are elevating that human signal. And that's why we built obviously Made, and our agents are really about empowering and making sure that every solopreneur, every entrepreneur that wants to actually bring their creative to life fully feel empowered, and they can become media powerhouses. That's really it. So how do you actually look at maximizing the human creative potential?
I could see here that RHEI, I mean, it's really exploded within the last little while, right? Because it says it grew into a platform reaching over 600 million monthly viewers. Artists like Diplo and T-Pain, I see, utilize this platform. Is that because I see content? I was playing around with the website and I noticed some names attached to it. So could you talk to me a little bit about that?
Of course. So we've been around for a number of years, and RHEI is really, we're the builders behind Made. So you can think of as RHEI, we're a technology company, and we're building great technology that would actually really power this, obviously creative operating system. And through that, RHEI has obviously, has built other solutions to help, large IP owners, like independent individual content creators. And obviously Made is our latest platform, which we believe that is going to be the creative operating system for humanity. And we started Made for Enterprise in terms of working with some of the largest enterprise partners in the last year. And we're very excited to be working with the likes of Warner Music Group, obviously Paramount Global, Sony Pictures, Paramount Global. And some of those partnerships, we started working with them through our some of the solutions that we already had in place in, I would say, not the augmented creativity era, but the creator economy era, in terms of how we were providing them solutions to be able to help them build audiences. Now, what we've done with Made, we're really, disrupting and reinventing ourselves. And we're just, kind of looking at how do we actually, in this new era where content is abundant, and the creators are dealing with significant burnout, how do we actually give them far better, far more enhanced solutions that are really automating every aspect of that creative workflow? So we're very excited because obviously across all of RHEI, we work with a large number of customers, and we're excited about now the launch of Made as a SaaS self-serve product, not just a managed product, so we can actually give every human that ability to have access to this dream team to bring their creativity to life.
So I'm curious whether or not, I mean, you've been approached at all by any AI artists, because obviously it's the big thing that's being discussed right now. Like in terms of you providing a platform for the people behind that form of creativity, has that come up at all? Where does that sit, I guess, in terms of that? Because that's starting to explode. I imagine a lot of people are looking at creating their own AI artists, and they exist. Certain ones obviously are getting more attention than others. But is that something that you support through your platform at all?
Yeah, so no, I mean, our platform is the Creative OS. So all of our agents, whether if it's Milo that helps you from forming ideas to basically helping you, with playlisting, creating thumbnails. We have a great thumbnail studio, which is one of obviously the biggest challenges that every creator faces. How do you do that, to, editing capabilities, to community management, is everything around the creative. Because again, for us, the way we view this and how we want to kind of look at building Made and contributing to human creativity is to basically elevate that human signal, not to replace it.
Okay.
So we don't have anything I'm not here to comment about what others are doing with, kind of really AI creators. But I think, if you're looking at this shift, where, I think where you're getting to is where's the line between, creator autonomy and these AI driven outputs. And I think that, it's more of, I think to me is the most critical question for our time is governance. I
Hmm.
think if you think about it, like a film director, in a more of a traditional sense, let's say if you take Christopher Nolan, Christopher Nolan doesn't hold the camera. He doesn't sew the costumes, right? He doesn't, even edit every frame, but, what he does is that he is the author, right? Because, he holds the taste. He's the one that focuses on the actual creation of the content. He makes the decisions. So, if you think about it, and like if, for example, like we have Zania Monet is an example of obviously an AI artist. If AI is actually generating the entire product with no human soul, I think that's a commodity, which is what we're getting from all of these foundational models. And I think what we wanted to do very intentionally with Made was to make sure that the humans are the CEOs and our agents are their employees. So
Okay.
you're really kind of like elevating that visionary in chief to feel truly, truly empowered. So what that means is that if the AI can generate 50 thumbnails, 50 thumbnail options for your video, or maybe create 10 engagements for comments for, engaging with your super fans, the human ultimately the one that really aligns with their soul, with their brand. And I think the act of curation, is the autonomy. But the viral success at the end of the day ultimately belongs to the creator, belongs to the director, right? So the creator, creates the content, sets their taste graph, and then what we do within that taste graph, we want to understand that. We want to make sure that we understand their voice, we understand their values, we understand their boundaries. And that's, I believe, is like the act of authorship.
I think that's big because I mean, I look at this issue and I know everybody has something to say about it, and I don't think it's black and white. But the thing that comes to mind, and it's just that sentence, video killed the radio star. Like that idea that imagine that transition when radio went to TV, and then people that were in radio were complaining about what was going to happen with radio because TV obviously was taking over entertainment. This is a lot
Mhm.
more nuanced in terms of what's happening with the creative worlds. But the way I see it right now is just there's a lot of people when they're entertained, they're just gonna watch it, no matter what or who created it. And I think the most perfect example is oh God, what was that artist? His name was it was a
TV Norwood?
no, it was basically this big oh, I have it listed
Oh,
here. Sorry, apologies. Oh,
uh,
Breaking Rust.
Breaking Rust.
I'm
Yes,
not a
the
big
country. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
yes.
yeah. Of course. Yeah,
And
yeah,
I think
yeah.
it's a perfect example. I'm not a big country guy, but I listen to that song and I know it's catchy. And at the end of the day, I mean, obviously people I mean, the controversy around it, I understand it. But at the end of the day, it got like a ton, like millions of views, and people are still listening to that song. But what I really appreciate what you're doing is trying to understand and create that harness that creativity, right? By also harnessing AI. And I feel and we need people like you to be part of that discussion to talk about it a lot more. But in these formats, because like I mentioned, I feel like mainstream media is focusing too much on the hype of what like the extremes, making it painting it as like, is it going to replace fully? And I know this is a conversation that we're supposed to have. Uh, but I don't know. I feel is that wrong for me to say? I don't know. I feel
Yeah, it's
yeah.
interesting because there are two sides to it, right? There's one part where like obviously some of these AI artists are getting traction, and the other side you are also kind of dealing with the backlash. And I think the backlash is kind of valid. In fact, it's actually kind of the market validating our entire thesis, right? I think and it's interesting. I kind of look at a lot of AI content as like junk food, right? Can you have it? Sure, you have it,
AI
but you're not
sloth.
gonna
Yeah.
you're not going to use it like you're not going to use it as your main source of nutrition, right? So what I see is kind of like what people are like rejecting isn't the technology. I think what I believe is that what they're rejecting is that spirituality hollow. So whether if you're thinking about the country artist or if you're thinking about Zania Monet, I mean, she also was like the top R&B artist, a Billboard, kind of digital tracks and so on and so forth. I think it represents the idea that you can actually replace the human soul with a commodity algorithm. That's the problem, right? And I think that is a failed model because humans actually crave connection with other humans, right? Not necessarily simulations. And I think the synthetic fog of average AI generated content, is coming. We're already seeing it, and some of us are very entertained consuming some of it, but, we know this, right? But the backlash actually proves that, kind of like the scarcer the human authenticity becomes, then the more valuable it becomes, right? Because it becomes more and more rare because you're getting so much more of that AI generated content. So I think this is also a bit around the crisis of consent. So if you kind of think about these synthetic avatars, they were often like trained on also data that was scraped from, the internet, and it was also trained based on content that wasn't licensed. And I think that's the other part of it. So you're saying, hey, I'm actually creating AI generated content, and that AI generated content is kind of like, it doesn't have any specific soul attached to it. And if it's purely generated by AI, for AI, then humans are going to actually decide that, hey, I do actually crave a human connection. And I do not want to just connect with a simulation. Yes, you were going to consume some of it, but it's not going to be all of it. So I think one is that, and I think the, aspect of this whole supply chain is another factor where, you're kind of looking at these foundational models, and they're not all the same, because you have great players that are looking at paying licensing fees to be able to actually license that content to train their models. But you have also other players that haven't actually licensed that content, that haven't trained their models correctly. So you're also not paying the artists by using their actual IP to train these models and train these algorithms. And therefore, I think, it's important to have more players that are very much so like building companies on this ethical supply chain. And I'm very proud of what we're doing at RHEI, because we launched Data Pro as one of our solutions. And the whole premise of Data Pro was data licensing. So we actually look at data as a source of monetization for artists, for creators, and at the end of the day, we want to be able to armor them, protect them, and that human signal as part of it.
Data's currency right now. That is the most important thing. And not everybody, I mean, the old automation is just dashboards and people were supposed to analyze it. And then now with these, agentic AIs, basically they're looking at that data and they're telling you a story in terms of what you should do better or can do better, or what you've been doing great, like, which I think is super valuable, especially for content creators. But for me,
actually, you know what, Eric, this is a really good point, because it also goes back to the first point at the end, how we started our conversation. I think it's about we need to stop building tools, and we need to actually start building symbiosis to be able to connect humans with AI. I think, if you're looking at business models, the business models need to move again from replacement to symbiosis. And I think the best models are like models similar to Made, where you have a human creator that is deploying an intelligent team to become a media empire. And a bad model is having, for example, an AI label that is signing an AI artist to replace humans. I don't think that is the right model. And I think that we need to really kind of challenge companies that are really not taking that into consideration.
I think you touched on something that resonates with a lot of people. I think there's a lot of people out there that dream about doing certain things, about starting their own business or creating content. And it's just time, right? And I think even when you really think about like single moms, people that have two jobs, like they're when it comes to efficiency, that's what we're lacking. And time is of the essence for a lot of people. And if you're basically have access to tools that allow you to, leverage your ideas, then I think that's a beautiful thing. And I think we need to hold on to that and talk a lot more about how it's guiding people in that sense, rather than, I hate to use the word fear mongering, but in some cases,
sure.
That's what makes the headlines.
And Eric, what is so exciting? I'll tell you what is so exciting. For Made, we made these agents proactive, so the interaction with the agents are so effortless. I think a lot of times, the challenge of adopting new technology is about you have to learn it. You think about the design is conversational design. So you don't have to learn a new platform to figure out how to actually you can be having greater output. So I think what I'm so excited about, especially with Made, is that we have these proactive agents that you can effortlessly work with. So you actually don't have to learn a new technology and take so much time to learn it. that becomes that much more effortless. So you can actually then delegate your work to obviously our creative agents, so you can have a much greater output. Because I think a lot of times what creators find it to be challenging is like, you get a new piece of technology, the platform's so complex, you start using it within the first 2 minutes, you quit because you just haven't had that ability to learn it. It's more frustrating. And, a lot of us as humans, we don't like change. You get started working on something and you give it a shot within 2 minutes. You say, hey, you know what, I'm just going to go back to my old way of doing things. And that, kind of like process of what I'm used to. Whereas I think with new technology, all the great companies that are out there, we're building platforms that are going to make it so much easier for the human to adopt the technology and delegate to be doing things that are far more strategic and more creative.
I'm excited to try it. I look forward to trying it. I was playing around with it, and the price also seems pretty reasonable in terms of getting started, right? Which is super important, especially as somebody who is just like what you said, a solo entrepreneur.
Oh, absolutely. And, we have made it, we have multiple pricing tiers, and we're excited for you to try it, for everyone else to try it. And this was truly, truly a pleasure, Eric. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. If anybody's interested, I guess, in kind of picking your brain a little bit more in terms of, I don't know, learning more about RHEI and about what you do, what's the best way to reach out?
You can always reach out to us at info@rhei.com, or you can obviously sign up for the platform for a free trial at getmade.ai.
Awesome. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much.
That's a wrap for today's episode. If you benefited from what you've learned today, feel free to leave us a review on iTunes. You can also find all our past and future episodes on YouTube and Spotify under Brains Byte Back. And if you'd like to connect with us directly, you can always reach out to us by email at info@sociable.co. Remember, your feedback helps us grow. We welcome it. We appreciate you joining us. Until next time.